Hi.
Hi.
Oh, you're
Yes.
on speaker
So-
and you're on you should use YouTube, I think.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So let's check our technical parameters. Hi.
Can you're
Yeah.
on speaker and you're on sure. Okay, I'm gonna do something on this.
Let's check our technical.
Okay. Okay. I think this is it.
設定で
うん
背景を
うん。
ぼかさないやつにした方がいいか。
ああ。
あと
これか
誰かが入りたがっている。
なんて忙しいの。背景をぼかすバックグラウンド
お
の No makeup. Shit. Can you see us now? A bit.
Yes, I see you. Yeah. But we just like slightly
Have you
lagging in
met-
sound.
There's a delay.
It's very, yeah. Okay. Have you met Mako?
Hi.
No. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
And then
Hi.
Hannah is here.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
See you.
Well, yeah. We are recording it, but just wait for 5 minutes. Can you check if you can share your file?
Present. Yeah. Let's check it out.
If not, I will. Perfect. Yeah. ビクター・ベルゾエロフさん、よろしくお願いします。
こちらこそです。
Hearing echoes from YouTube translation. Somebody, that's you. Okay. Meeting chat. Okay. I'm gonna close that.
So it is working, yeah? The presentation.
Yeah, perfect. And can
All
you
right, so let's show, can I show you like the next slide? So, all right, it's the next slide. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right,
日本の
yeah.
研究所平和のための手紙、ロシアでの現代。
Okay.
So, yeah, we have one audience from Kyoto.
Yeah, that's,
Wonderful.
I assume, yes, it's a success.
But unfortunately, I'm going to record this and then show to other people. So we have to take it serious.
Measures, yeah.
So yeah. Today we Kana and Mako are preparing like food using my grandmother's plum umeboshi, the
Oh my gosh.
pickled plums, and it actually it's kind of it's a food art. I wasn't expecting something like that. It was like salty, but it's like rosemary in it, and yeah, it's and then it's not it's kind of. Can you see this? I'm not sure.
Yes, like, yeah, I can see your glass, yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's creative stimulation.
its taste changes out. So maybe we leave some for you. Yeah, it's then after this talk, we set for crying. We have one onion for one person. We have all these things to avoid contaminations, aprons and gloves and we have Ziploc. I think Ziploc is the best to collect the tears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we start? Maybe.
I guess we can.
Mm.
Yes, since there are only 3 of us, so yeah, just like 3 participants.
Yeah.
So shall I begin, or you shall be the one who like present the topic, the meeting, and that kind of stuff?
Okay. I guess I should, right? Okay. So I invited Victor-san, who is a researcher of Japanese art, and I happened to come across his call for the letter. How to say, collecting letters for peace when the invasion to Ukraine started. And at that time, I was trying to edit the video of my father's death. And I was like thinking, we can't kill ourselves. What shall we, it's like, it's so hard to die these days in modern society, I was thinking. And then the war breaks, and invasion. Yeah, like according to Victor's sensibility and sensibility. Yeah. And yeah, if there's a battlefield, then you can die like in one instance, and it's just very strange, and I was very confused. Come in. Dozo. Audience, yeah. And こんにちは。And 全然大丈夫です。トークやってて、ちょうど変なイントロダクションしてるところですけど、and then yeah, started to talk to Victor-san, and yeah, he's very easy to talk to, and I feel very close, and I thought it's appropriate, and I just finished editing the video on my father's death, and I thought it's very much appropriate to invite Victor to talk about life and death, because he's in different circumstances, and which is, I don't know if I were Russian or Ukrainian, I don't know, or there's a different wars everywhere, like for different kind of killing zones, but I usually forget about them. But I think if there's a chance, like meeting somebody in person, and finding out what it is, and also it's important to hear the both sides. If there's some dispute, I think it's important. It's important to hear the both sides, and so that's why we invited Victor-san, and he knows so much about art, and he's cool. So yeah, and yeah, please, and he will introduce about Russian art as well, and it's quite exciting. Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you, yeah,
Stefan.
for such a nice
Yes,
introduction. So
Mm.
yeah, I shall continue with the presentation. So, you know, when we just like started thinking about like the topic of our conversation, so it was like really hard to embrace all the material because I just like thought that we should talk about life and death topic. We also should talk about politics in Russia and how it is connected with art, what happened since February when the invasion began. So like a lot of topics. And I've been dealing like really hard. So what kind of narratives should I choose for our conversation? So, but well, I've managed to show like a map of some narratives that like are current in Russian art and how it just like mutated from the early 2000 to the current state. And the reason why I ask you to watch the documentary that I sent you links, yeah. So we just like to show the some kind of the continuity of the process that are happening in Russia and how it is related to the social culture and the realization that people somehow like they are living, but they are not pleased with the circumstances where they're living in. So they are trying to find a better space, a better history. So this is also like had a very close connection to the matter of life and death. So I won't be talking that much about myself since like it's like written in the description of our meeting. But well, I once again like very slightly we'll talk about it. So I'm the editor, the only one editor of the project called Gendai AI. So this is a project that is like some kind of a intermediate agent between Japanese and Russian art. So I'm trying to write extensively on the topic of Japanese art. So I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing articles, interviews, so reviews on the exhibition, like that was in Moscow during back then. So it appeared in 2019. And I'm also the chief researcher at the research laboratory at the Garage Contemporary Museum of Art that is called J100R. So it's like a research laboratory dedicated to the history of the representation of Japanese art in Russia. So since 1920s till nowadays. And like when the invasion began, so I've been, as Kyoko already said, I've started a letter campaign called Heiwa no Tami no Tigami. So it just like was a campaign that, well, at some point it like changed objectively the reason why we just like all of us, all the participants of this campaign were included because we were trying to not like to choose sides, but we were trying to have some common grounds to talk about. So this campaign, like, I think it was quite a useful lesson if we're talking about this topic. And so this was like a combined actions of me and Yoshinori Niwa. So he helped me a lot with this campaign. And later on, I started a series of interviews called Sign of the Times. So it was like also a very good experience to talk about other nationalities, other art worlds, because it was basically a series of interviews with Japanese artists who worked with the past, with the memory and work with the trauma of war, of history. And for me, it was like really interesting to comprehend their experience and somehow try to connect it with the current reality. So this is what I've been doing lately. So since the research laboratory that I'm currently working in is still active, the situation with Gendai AI when the war broke out is slightly different because obviously Gendai AI was like a very independent project and it was like very enthusiastic in terms of making the content. And when the war broke out, I just lost that sense of how can I talk about art when, well, people are dying on both sides. And it was really hard for me to keep telling people about since I wrote various reviews on exhibitions, I've been trying to tell Russian audience what's happening in the Japanese art world, what kind of exhibitions are going on. And since the February, I've been thinking, how have I got that sense of responsibility, trying to continue to give these sense of messages, talks about Japanese art. And I've been really struggling how to obtain this common ground to continue that sort of conversation. And there were also some technical issues. For example, the Gendai Eye, so our page on the website called Sigma, which is a platform for various art critics, art writers. So it was blocked in Russia because there were some anti-war statements. So basically the home of my whole activity was blocked in Russia, so you can only access it with the VPN services. And I also got real problems with all podcasts because, for example, podcasts, you have to create a cloud where your podcast will be safe. And those kind of services say goodbye to Russia since the February. So I also just can only put them on YouTube or something. And there was a small part of my subscribers. I had a page on Patreon. So they gave me some fee for what I've been doing. So a small money benefits that were coming from this project, and also all these payment systems like PayPal and the whole structure of Patreon stopped working in Russia since February. So Gendai just currently is coming through a number of changes. So I'm just trying to think about it. How can we deal with this project right now? So what topics are relative and what topics for me is just morally unacceptable. But well, let's stop talking about me since I guess I've already said enough about myself. So I've been trying to understand how can I describe the situation in Russian art through a number of decades. The reason is, when the USSR broke out and some countries were given with the independence and were starting to live freely, and some artists were basically an underground artist in Soviet times, they began independent economically, creatively, so they just started to work on their own. But there is always a close connection, at least, for example, in Russian art, between art community and state. And during those decades, 2000, 2010, 2020s, in Russia, you can see the strong dependence of art community and state that, for example, some exhibitions were forbidden due to various cases. And art community, well, they were protesting a little bit, but at some point, they are saying, all right, this exhibition was prohibited, but another won't be, right? But year by year, most of the exhibitions that were politically stimulated or politically or on politic topics, on social topics, they were just slightly censored by the state. So the state just got into the art world. And there is I've been also thinking about how to talk about art community in Russia, because at my point of view, and it could be subjective, art community in Russia is very fragmented. So there are many artist groups, institutions, researchers, but they are not connected to each other, not at all. So there were some tries to create some kind of a platform that will unite various art groups, artists, to be one creative force, so that can just have some conversations with the state, with the museums, with the institutions. But through these decades, we haven't seen any visible positive sides of this story because art community was very fragmented. And I can also say that this de-atomization of art community is also connected not only to the art world, but to literature world, the theater world, and maybe the rest like of the society in Russia. So that was a problem. And the problem is that most of the underground Soviet artists who were just like very marginal underground artists in Soviet times. So when they had an opportunity to earn money with their works from Soviet times, so they basically were not thinking about the future generation of artists. They were eager to explore international spaces. They were eager to earn a lot of money by selling their works. So the generation of artists from, for example, from the 70s, from the 80s, so they were so eager to earn a lot of money in late 90s, in early 2000. So just like they basically forgot about future generations. And there is like a strict order between like post-Soviet artists and the new generation of artists that appeared like in 2000 and 2010. So we've been talking about some things like, because art world is also hugely connected to the state of human rights organization. So by the last year, we've lost 3 huge human rights organizations in Russia. So it's called Memorial. Memorial was engaged into talking about censorship, into the victims who died different situations that happened in 1930s during the Stalin regime, during the system of Gulag camps. So they were just like basically pro-historic, pro-truthfully organization who is trying to research those contexts and to retrieve those victims who suffered during various periods of time during like the Soviet Union. And it was closed in December by Russian government. And the logic of Russian government right now is just like to get rid of all the uncomfortable pages of history. So later on, already in this year, about like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Moscow Helsinki Group, which is one of the hugest human rights group in Russia, it was also closed and liquidated by the Russian government. And the same happened to Sakharov Center. So we just like lost 3 main like platforms that were fighting for human rights in Russia. And I also should give a small explanation about the status of foreign agent in Russia. So foreign agent is a term that appeared in the jurisdiction of Russian government in 2018, I guess. And at the beginning, it was used quite like rarely. But for now, for example, if you're receiving any monies from abroad, and it's just like basically, if we're talking about like some, for example, artists from YouTube, bloggers, or if we're talking about, I don't know, politicians, cultural workers. So if you're receiving any money from abroad, you can give like this sort of a label, and you will be called a foreign agent because you receive money from abroad. And while you have this status, you have to note every of your material that is published on the internet that this material was created by foreign agent who is receiving foreign like currency from abroad. And it just like also had a very huge pressure on various people in Russia because well, we're just like really hard to continue with on things when you got that kind of bureaucracy that is pressuring on you. But like human rights are always be very hugely connected to the freedom of creative expression, to the freedom of the individuals. And we are like currently totally lost it during this year and other. And this is the theme that I've been talking with Kyoko like maybe some couple of weeks ago. So if you are having this status of the foreign agent, so you should, well, all the books in the bookstores are covered in these like paper packages. And there is like, well, the workers of like those shops. So they are like by their hand, they are writing down the name of the book because, well, you can't show the cover of the book if it is created by foreign agents. So these books are hidden somehow like in newspaper packages. And since there appeared a number of laws that suppress an LGBTQ society, and what is Russian government calling is like LGBTQ propaganda, because they're thinking that if you just like, it's also like a very hard and well difficult talk, because right now all these like oppressive laws against the LGBTQ society in Russia is also like on the mainstream, because it's like a very popular topic to demonize the LGBTQ society in Russia. And for example, if you're saying that you are homosexual, somehow the Russian government is also treating it as some sort of LGBTQ propaganda. If you're saying, for example, like homosexual people are normal people, it's also LGBTQ propaganda. So it's just like an example of how it is like treated in a public sphere. So it's things are getting hidden. And all these actions somehow lead to self-censorship. So people like, it's many different like part of our cultural life. So they start to think that, all right, we shall do something beforehand, before they will forbid something. They didn't say, well, for example, like we need to cover books, but we will cover them because we are afraid. So they are starting to think beforehand because they are like in this act of self-censorship. But back to the art stuff. So during like the past 20 years, we had a huge amount of various independent institutions. And this was the reason why the art was so like creative and independent during the 2000s, because there appeared a number of places where art could be exhibited in huge, like not state museums, but independent spaces. And those kind of enthusiasm and initiatives that are coming from people who just like gave their money to build such things. So they've been trying to create an art space for various artists. But you see, it's just like for most of the cases, we can see the rise of Russian contemporary art as an institution in the late 2000s and the early 2010. But well, as you can see, a lot of various initiatives. So just like the process basically called gentrification, that is like was quite common in America, in Europe, in Japan. So they were starting to work with all these industrial spaces to transform them into art spaces, to just like giving exhibitions, biennales, various sorts of activity. But those kind of places appeared like enthusiastically, and they were not dependent on the state budget. So they're just trying to find any reason for them like to earn money to support their activity. And the bad side of it, that when the state had been controlling art world with their like what they are earning, what they are selling, and how can you interact with like foreign, for example, organizations, cultural funds, how do you receive your grants for your cultural activity? Those spaces like were drastically dependent on the state, because like stop receiving any money from foreign grants, but well, they have somehow to survive. So we just got a huge amount of spaces like Multimedia Art Museum that is just like basically, well, it looks like slightly like a Guggenheim Museum, but well, it just like was like one of the first institutions that were professionally involved into research and making an exhibitions of international and Russian photography. So it's a huge one. But those type of like a state museum that is like slightly dependent on the private foundation and state foundation from the Moscow government. And we also got a huge number of biennales. So it was like Raw Industrial Biennale of Contemporary Art that appeared in 2010, and it was like a huge number of Japanese artists who were invited to various events of Raw Industrial Biennale, like Yoko Ono was invited once, Rie Kochiga, that I guess Chimpong from SMAPA Group was also invited, I guess in 2017 or something. And there were just like a place in Moscow, like two biennale in Moscow were held, Moscow Biennale of Contemporary Art, the first one, and the International Biennale for Young Art. So like also lots of artists from various parts of the world I considered to like take a participants in there. It was like huge international sports for creative expression. But year by year, those kind of the field of freedom of the expression of freedom, so it just got more and more narrow because well, when the government is invited to sponsor these type of events, so at some point they just like started to think like a manager. So what are you showing? Or should we show this? Or should we show that? Or maybe, well, we just like slightly get rid of this artist and invite another one. And like, for example, the fate of the Moscow Biennale of Contemporary Art. So just like when it appeared in the middle of 2000s, it was such like a huge boom for artists. So like they were open to the international world. Some like foreign curators, like top foreign curators from France, from England were invited. And it just like was completely unimaginable for Russian artists during these times to take a participant in those type of events. But year by year, like the pool of international artists like got smaller and smaller. And like, for example, like the last like really important Biennale in Moscow, it was held in 2000, I guess in 2017, and it was like curated by Hasegawa Yuko. But later on, there was such amount of scandals during this Biennale because there were some problems with financial like visibility. So like, because the organizers has changed. At first, there were independent curators who lead this project, but later on it was like pro-state curators who, well, objectively, they were not a curators, they were just like some sort of a government representative. And we see like all these initiatives fell down by the inclusion of, well, governmental participants. So this is a place where I just like having my research laboratory, and this is the place where I work in. It's the Garage Contemporary Art Museum. So it also like was very painful for the whole collective of the museum since like the invasion began, because the museum has so much initiatives for the future projects for like a couple of years in the future. And they were also planning, as you can see, like the small like picture with like a new building that was planned to be built by and reconstructed by Sana. But well, since the invasion began, we just like, I guess this project has been frozen because, well, the museum is not able to continue its activity right now. So Garage Contemporary Art Museum is only continuing its research activity. This is why my laboratory is still working. It's continuing its library and some sort of educational activity. But the whole exhibition stuff has been frozen. And I guess if we're talking about various museums in Russia and how they reacted to the invasion, so this was, I guess, one of the only museums that stopped all of its exhibition activities since February. So they weren't trying to hold any of the exhibitions, although they got lots of plans. And so this is how we just like, what I'm trying to say that there are lots of independent institutions, but maybe not that independent in terms of institutional activity, because as we all know, institution is kind of hierarchy that is working like very hard, and you got all these levels of appreciation of like, well, it's still like a problem of institutions around the world. But what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to show you is just like how contemporary institutions in Russia appeared and how they are working in the contemporary art space, how they look like. Because, well, just like this, in this case, there is some sort of discommunication between us and our reality. So 2014 was like a turn year for Russia. So at least like, so the Crimea was invaded, and later like by the Russian government, it was added to Russia, and Sochi Olympics with all these like funny like that the Olympic circle wasn't open, and it's become some sort of a meme back then. So 2014 was a turn-up year because after the Russia invaded Crimea, so many of the cultural institutions, so they shut down their offices in Moscow. So they rejected a slight number of projects, and there were some sanctions against Russian government. But still, you know, this like period of time between 2014 and 2022, it was just like we see this censorship that it was growing year by year, but there was some sense of, you know, just like, oh, maybe, well, it won't touch us, or maybe, well, we will go through this. So this is how things were happening back then. But 2014 is a very important year in contemporary Russian history because it shows that if you want to build up an image, a positive image of a country, and you just like have to be sure that you have well connections with all the neighboring countries, with all the world. But when you are trying to isolate yourself and when you are rejecting, like some countries are saying, oh, like, for example, like British Council, they had their office in Moscow and they closed it, like saying, oh, right, they're like, they behave badly. But why do you think that they are behaving themselves badly? Yes, it's their reaction towards the Russian politics. So when you're saying like, oh, British Council closed its offices in Moscow, all right, so we just like, we are like proud of being Russians. It's not correct. So 2014, back then, it's a point that is very connected to the Russian invasion to the Ukraine. And it is very important, like a turn-up year when Vladimir Putin was just like slightly, well, still maybe at the beginning of his like eager activity, like to get unfriended by most of the countries of the world. But it is important to mention that 2014 is, for most of the people who lived in Russia, so yeah, they were part of Russian artists, people who left Russia after 2014, which is like a small migration wave that came from Russia to various parts of Europe. But for most of the people who lived in Russia during that time, so they got so kind of euphoria when the Crimea was invaded because they thought, oh, well, like Crimea, go back to Russia. So we just like so miss you, those part of land. But you see, nobody forbidden you during that times to go to Crimea, even if it was a part of Ukraine. So you can go there, but why should we just like get connected to Russia once again? So it just like was a question of territorial integrity. And all of these people who criticized Crimea invasion called it invasion. So like they got some problems. Later on, we will see how these things will develop. So when the invasion to Ukraine started in February, I was thinking about how the linguistics of state museums reacted to the invasion. And this is kind of interesting things because, well, we all understand that museum is a huge institution with thousands of people, artists, museum workers, like technical workers. But there could be some options of strategies. So for example, like Garage Contemporary Art Museum, so they shut down all the exhibition activities, but it's a private institution. But if we're speaking about state institutions, so they are going through some number of like mutations. So during like the first days of war, those type of museums, they were saying things like that they are shocked by the events, but they are thinking about themselves like a cultural messiah who are trying to self-culture and to like, you know, blah, blah, blah about cultural dialogue with common people. And I just like was during this period, I was like really shocked by the reaction of the state museums. Well, we do know what they like in kind of events that they're dependent on the state funding, that they are dependent because they're afraid of that they're going to lose their jobs But all these unnecessary comments about like the role of the culture that is tried to unite people, give them hope, and I don't think it's a correct position, especially from like the moral side of view when you're talking about victims on both sides, in Russia and Ukraine, especially Ukraine in this case. So, and well, that I was like totally mesmerized by the statement that went from the Shusif Museum of Architecture, the only like institution that is currently exhibiting and researching architecture in Russia. So they were considering themselves as like a people who, after Holocaust, after Auschwitz, so like the director of this museum said that even in Auschwitz, people were like trying to create something beautiful to like overcome the Holocaust. So she was like comparing the Holocaust problem to the Russian invasion. And I think it's inadequate comparison because, well, people who were in like Nazi camps, so they were trying to survive and they were the victims of fascist regime. And director of the museum, so he's some sort of representing the state machine which started this war. And when you are saying that the experience of people who have gone through Holocaust, through camps, that they were just like making some creative stuff, but they were making this creative stuff to support themselves. And what are you doing in the position of director of the museum? Are you trying to give hope? Well, I don't think that architectural exhibitions are giving hope to like most of the people, especially if you are at the invading side. But Hermitage Museum that is located in St. Petersburg. So the director of the Hermitage Museum has become one of the, how to call it correctly. So he has become one of the leading figures who support the war. And he was saying that all the latest exhibitions of Hermitage Museum is also some kind of powerful cultural offensive. So it's also like some sort of integrating with the war strategy. And he even said that our exhibitions of the Hermitage Museum is some kind of special operation. So this is how the Russian government called this war. So it's not calling it like a war against Ukraine, it's calling it a special operation. So he just started to think of himself, and he's saying like, well, many times in his interviews since February, so like he's calling himself and most of the Russian people like we're all militarists and imperialists. So he's just like trying to like in Soviet times, I guess, to oppose to the West. So he's thinking about a special mission of Russia, of Russian museums. And it's like sort of a terrible, because like you see just like this person like Piotrovsky, who had been the director of the Hermitage Museum, I guess, for 30 years. Well, it's also a question like of changeability of directors, yes. But he'd been like making international projects for many times. He even like was making huge exhibitions of contemporary Japanese art. But for example, it was in 2000, I guess, 2015, an exhibition called Mona no Aware, well, was held at the Hermitage Museum. There were lots of Japanese artists, like many of them. And they held some sort of huge international events like Manifesta in 2013. But you see, it's just like, I don't know, well, we don't know at all what people like really think in this situation. But I guess that when you start to just like to change your way of speaking and like on the contrast what you've been doing before, so you just got lots of questions towards these persons. So after all these statements appeared a question of, for example, some museums like Hermitage Museum, they were planning to build up some new branches of their museum in various countries of the world. So, for example, Hermitage branch was planned to be established in Barcelona. So it's still the question which is unresolved. because, well, they're trying to understand, is it possible to build a new building and to give some collection of art to Barcelona or not? But still, like during the February, during the March, all of the museums in Russia, they were so like eager to retrieve their collection. For example, there was a collection of works that was on the exhibition in Japan. It was, I guess, French Impressionists or something. So it was like a collection that was from the Pushkin State Museum of Art, but it was in Japan in February. So, and in various articles and comments from museums, they were afraid that their collection won't be back to Russia. So this is the only reason that they were carried about during this period of time. So they were so afraid that, for example, Japan won't give them back a collection of works that was given them for the exhibition. And some museums, like Hermitage Museum, they put a moratorium on the issuance of works. So if some foreign institution will ask for works from Hermitage Museum, they won't give it. And Hermitage Museum is also for 1 year, they put a ban on any foreign exhibitions from unfriendly countries. Unfriendly countries, it's also a term that appeared in February. So Vladimir Putin and Russian government, they created a list of unfriendly countries that are joined the sanctions, that are unfriendly towards Russia. So Japan is in this list. So, but if we take a look at friendly countries, it's like a very short list. It's something like North Korea, Iran, China, some like Middle Eastern countries, some African countries. So like a very good company to show art. So, and one of the main questions that still many people, researchers, museum workers are questioning themselves, what will happen to the collections that were stolen from Ukrainian museums during the invasion? So I guess it's like about thousands of various objects, paintings, sculptures. So where would they go after the invasion, after the war? So is there any like plan for State Museum to give them those kind of objects? So how it is like institutionally correct to receive those kind of like stolen objects from Ukrainian museums? So these kind of questions are still like in the air because nobody knows the answer for it. So after the war broke out, there were many exhibitions that were cancelled or organizers cancelled it. So one of the project Diversity was a huge project showed in Tretyakov Gallery. So it was a project between European countries and Russia. So it just like was a huge exhibition of European contemporary art. It started, I guess, in the early February, and when the invasion started, so the organizers from the Germany, they decided to close the exhibition. So we got all sorts of like initiatives from European countries who decided to close exhibitions where they started with Russia or that they planned with Russia. For example, during, I guess in March, it was announced that India have decided to cancel the exhibition of Indian contemporary art that was planned to be held in spring 2022. But this is only one side of initiatives that were coming from like foreigner organizers of exhibition. But later on, we like see the censorship that was coming from the Russian institutions. So one of the exhibitions, what was opened, I guess, maybe a couple of days before the invasion began, it was an exhibition of Grisha Pruskin, who is a very like famous post-Soviet contemporary artist with all these images and his small statues. So he opened this exhibition and it was like slightly connected to various images of a state, of the Soviet state, of the current state. So it was closed. Officially, Tretyakov Gallery said it was closed due to technical reasons. Unofficially, it was closed because of the censorship. Other projects that was closed in the Tretyakov Gallery, it was called Exit Through the Red Door. It was an exhibition of the Russian contemporary art from early 80s to 2010. It was also closed, and like, although it was planned to be open in spring of 2022. Later on, we just like encountered the situation with the Moscow Museum of Modern Art in July 2022. There was an exhibition of young contemporary artists, and it was like a joint project of young curators and young artists. So they just like both were amateur and youth. It was called Finns Citizens, and like the people who exhibited their works, they were trying to express their negative attitude toward the war, and they retrieved their works and replaced them with this type of marker. I'm sorry that my work isn't there with you for a reason I can't even tell, because this was the point where if you're saying, and if you're calling this a war, you can be fined. If you like if you are saying that Russia invaded Ukraine, it could be considered as a fake, and you can be fined or even go to prison for that. So this was an artist statement made by various artists, the participants of his exhibition. So, for a reason I can't even tell. But the directorship of the museum told that this project didn't imply a political context and was financed by private funds, and they are not risking the situation or their reputation, and so they cannot accept it on their side. And at the same time, on another platform, which is called on Peshchanya Gallery, there was also a group exhibition of young artists. And there was one work called Prive by Art Collective M+M. So it was a small installation that was called the Golden Found of Russia. So just like it's installation that shows like the gold currency and the gold found of Russia. So because of this work, this whole exhibition was also cancelled. So it was just like basically, but you see what is really important, that many of these exhibitions, officially they're closed by the comment like due to technical reasons and not like objectively showing the real state of affairs. And the other like space that suffered from the invasion was Avant-Garde Center on Shablavka. So this center is located in Moscow. Its curator, Alexandra Selivanova, closed this space, although she curated it from 2014. It was a space, a research and exhibitional space strictly dedicated to the 1920s, so to the Russian avant-garde, to the Russian constructivism. So they were making exhibitions dedicated to this topic, various type of exhibitions. It's like one of the most unique places, although it's not that big, but it was like a really enthusiastic space. But it is also got controlled by the Moscow government, and she said that she can't afford herself to continue working because there's so much of bureaucracy is coming on, and they started to check all the social networks. So what you're writing on your Facebook, or so are you anti-war, or have you said anything wrong about Vladimir Putin or war state? Have you, so if you're, for example, a curator in the gallery that is subdued to Moscow government, so you just check your artists who are exhibited in your gallery, maybe they have got some anti-war messages on Facebook or something. So she just basically got tired of all this shit with the censorship and controlling, and she decided to close this space. So it's like a huge loss, I guess, but in these circumstances, I guess it is better to be closed than to continue work under such circumstances. But as you can see, the life is still going on. Not so like many museums can afford themselves to be closed. So the art life is still going on, and there are lots of people who are commercially or like enthusiastic, so they are still participating in art fairs in St. Petersburg, in Moscow. Both of these art fairs are like strictly connected to the government, like Art Fair 1703 was exhibited during the St. Petersburg Economical Forum where Putin was giving a speech, something about like his legacy or something. But all these art fairs are still going on, so people are just like trying to sell art. For me, I do understand the reason that some of the artists who just like still working in Russia, so they are trying to earn some money. But the affinity of these art fairs towards Russian government is huge. So there is like some obvious connections to the number of galleries that were chosen. And they also have gone through like the censorship because, well, not any artist could be sold at those art fairs, only like the one that were recommended by the government. And the same thing happened to GES. It's one of the new spaces, exhibitional spaces in Moscow. It was opened only in December 2021, and it was opened, and it's a property of Russian billionaire called Mikhail Son. He is the closest friend of Vladimir Putin and Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin. So he would just like open this space. The excursion for the Vladimir Putin was held right in the first days of the opening. Well, we didn't know if he liked it or not. I guess not. Well, he's not the type of guy who is like into contemporary art. He's basically more interested in invading foreign countries, not contemporary art. So this is a huge exhibitional space. So as I said, it was opened in December, and when the war started in February, so all the artists who like participated in the international projects in this space, so they all got rejected and they all left, and they were asked so they asked for their works to be returned, and it just like becomes some kind of an empty shell with. Well, there are some exhibition of Russian artists right now, but the space is huge. So we just got like many levels of various exhibitional spaces. It's also got an underground level, but you can't feel a space if you got no artists and no international projects. And that's a problem that many of Russian museums are currently facing. And one of the latest, appeared on this week. So there is a Russian art group called Mitski. It appeared in the 80s. Well, it's some sort of a, a naive art brut painting. So there was one work, one of the participants of this group called the Mitski Don't Want to Defeat Anyone. It was painted in 1984. So the exhibition was planned to be held in Russian Museum of Decorative Arts. So this work was banned from the exhibition because the director of the museum thought of it as a political context, that this artist somehow is against the war. But well, even the artist gave his official commentary that this work was created in 1984, so long before all the events had started. But well, the exhibition was closed. His work was retrieved, and all the banners around the museum, that were showing that the exhibition is open. So this sort of manifesto was painted by the paint on all these material that were promoting the exhibition. So this is how it works with the censorship regarding the exhibitional process in Russia right now. As you may know, another a very sad part of our reality, it happened to the artist and performative artist Alexandra Skolichenko. So she had a performance in March. So she went to various shops and markets, and she was changing the price tags with anti-war messages. She was just changing them and giving a small text that was saying we against the war, we against invasion. she was caught by the police in Moscow, and right now she's on trial. So she can, well, she can receive about from 5 to 7 years of imprisonment for this performance. And it's terrible to understand that, well, for such a small deed, you can lose a part of your life, a part of your time. And just like, well, 5 to 7 years, it's a huge period of your life. So right now she's on trial. She's in a very bad health condition. So her lawyers tried to object this for a number of times, but well, like Russian courts are also like on the side of the government. So we didn't know what will happen to her because, well, it's been, yes, half a year since all these processes has begun. It's been, well, the war in February, it will like 1 year. So, well, it's like a very huge case for like Russian art stage, like, so we didn't know how things will end for her. On the other side, as I said, so you can be, no, there is a strict border between artists who are suffering to tell the truth, to show that they're against the war. But for me, I guess, well, it's my subjectivity and, well, I can't do anything about it, but there is a type of artists who are trying like to get hyped on this subject, and like they're using this subject and they like live in Russia, trying to find some like, you know, funding for their works. Well, Danila Tkachenko is a Russian photographer. So he had a plan when the war parade, like a traditional war parade on 9th of the May in 2022, he was planned to use some well, small grenades, small bombs that smoke bombs that will just like express the colors of Ukrainian flag during this parade. So he didn't manage to release this type of project because federal agency of Russian government like followed his actions. So he didn't manage to realize this project. He left Russia, but his family got under like very strict pressure from police, and also his friend, although he didn't know about this action, so he got arrested and he's still under home arrest for this action. Although, well, we just like, as you can see, it's not an image of an actual project. It's just like, it's how it was supposed to look like. But, well, Danilo Tkachenko left Russia, although his relatives, his friends are under pure danger, but, well, he's just like, I guess, working with European galleries, and he just become hyped over this story. So this type of an story, how artists are dealing with this context. And while I was talking about Moscow Biennale of Contemporary Art, as I said, that from the later stages of life of Moscow Biennale, it turned into governmental project. And this was 9th Moscow Biennale that were supposed to open in the autumn of 2022. And it was like a combination of Russian artists or like, you know, pro-war, pro-Russian artists who were exhibiting on this Biennale, and they were just like, you know, artists from Donetsk, from Lugansk, so all this kind of territory that currently Russia are involved in. So it was like a very political statement, something about like, you know, that the historical mission of Russia, the legacy of Russia, what we're doing is fine, and all that kind of bullshit. But 9th Moscow Biennale, even it was prepared. So as you can see, the whole exhibition, so all the paintings were hang out on the wall. So it was prepared, but it was closed. So it's just like a type of censorship when it works both ways, even for pro-war, pro-patriotic artists. But there is a segment of art that I'm also like have to talk about, which, well, I don't really like at all. So this is type of a war art, like pro-patriotic, pro-nationalist art. So we just like basically well, try to make these contexts available. So it's like a sensoga. So it's just like adequately the same. So there are a lot of artists who are gathering governments grants from Russian government, and these are exhibitions are fully enthusiastic of nationalism and type of things that are connected to, like, as I said, like the historical mission of Russia, to its legacy, to its war campaign that it started in February. So there is a number of exhibitions, but we see this tendency that was coming from 2016. And it was like a tendency that was coming through various very uncreative artists who just like decided that they give up everything for the money. And the exhibition that was called Actual Russia Habitat, it was like first organized in 2016. And it was like very pro-Russian, pro-nationalist exhibition. It was curated by Arseny Steiner. And just like I found peculiarity about this exhibition and about Arseny Steiner, because he's there. His name is Yevgeny Steiner. He's a very, very famous Japanologist in Russia. So, well, just like it also like makes well, a very funny sense to me. So this type of war art appeared right now. And I won't say it's like very popular or very understandable, but we can see that the government is financially supporting all these types of exhibitions because it's promoting war, it's promoting anti-West mood and all that kind of stuff. So this is also like a very problem because, as you may understand, that the state museum are being asked to hold those type of exhibition. And like the exhibition that is called New Order, it's only like opened on the 20th of January, so about a week ago. So it is like situated in Wagner Center, and Wagner is a mercenary campaign that is fighting against Ukrainian people and killing them. But there's also a type of artist who just become like a main artist of the war. So this is Alexei Belaev-Gintoft. So he started his way back in the 80s, but right now he's one of the more war propaganda artists. So he created some kind of a theory that, well, that Russia is some sort of the successor of Roman Empire and that kind of bullshit. But you see, it's just like, maybe these people are sane enough to, well, just like simply understand that their theories and all this type of mythology around the Russian history. So just like they were trying to earn some political points, some symbolic points for them, for their image. But I don't even think that in this case, Russian audience are like reacting towards and like quite have a sympathy for this type of art. And it's a funny situation that during the times like early 2008, we all got all these like sorts of huge art prizes. Like there were two art prizes in Russia called, one of them was called Innovation, and the now was called Kandinsky Art Prize. So Innovation was a huge art prize for many young and contemporary artists. And in 2008, the Innovation Art Prize was given to Alexei Belaev-Gintoft. So the jury, about 4 members of the jury said, well, this artist is clearly a fascist. So we're just like excluding ourselves from this jury and we won't be giving any art prizes to him. But another members of the jury said, well, all right, well, he is just like making some totalitarian art, but well, he's not a fascist. So maybe we should give him an art prize. So finally, they give him an art prize in 2008. And well, we're right now in 2022, and he's clearly like using an ideology of nationalism or fascism. Or that's what his paintings are about. So those members of a jury that was telling that he is not fascist, well, are quite, well, they're not correct, and well, we see the results right now. So what I'm trying to show you with the next few slides, because, well, I'm not trying to tell you the short history of Russian contemporary art, but I'm trying to say how art and politics are strictly connected to each other since the late 90s. So we got two canonical cases of Russian contemporary art. One of them is a work that was created by Avdei Oganyan. He is a Soviet Russian Armenian artist. In 1998, he created a performance called Young Atheist. So he bought a number of reproduction of icons, like Russian icons with saints on all that stuff. So he take them to the church where priests spill their holy water on those icons. And when he had these types of performances, he started cutting them with the axe. So he was starting to destroying those type of images. So the point of this action was like trying to raise the question of the original and the copy work and how we're dealing with all these sacred images. The Russian Orthodox Church, even when it was like not so powerful, like right now in 1998, it overreacted towards these performances. So the police accused Teroganyan that he's violated the law of the freedom of religion and something like this. So he was like the first in the post-Soviet time who had left Russia because of his performance, and because, well, the legal actions towards him, there were some accusations because, well, he just cut down with the axe the image of an icon, and it's still the problem of Orthodox Church and how people are related to religion in contemporary Russia is still a problem. So it was like a first case. And later on, another huge performance artist during this period, Oleg Mavromati. So he had this type of performance in center of Russia, so where he got on the crucifixion. So he was really nailed. So they used real nails, and they just stamped him into his hands on the wooden cross. So he spent a couple of hours in the center of Moscow, on the cross. So he was also exploring those type of public spaces, how they react towards performance, and how you can create an image that is discussing the problem of the religion in contemporary Russia. So on the backside of his back, there was a small message that was cut on his back. So, "I'm not a son of God." So he was also prosecuted by the police. So he was also and he left Russia in 2000 and never come back to it. So he's living in Europe. And these were a few cases that were dealing with one of the most vulnerable topics of Russian culture, the religion, and people, at least some of them, were offended with it. Although, well, as you know, at least during that times, Russia was kind of democracy and that stuff. Well, in some options of it. Later on, there was a huge exhibition in 2005. In 2003, it was called Beware Religion. So there were various types of artists who worked with religious images, and there was an exhibition about this connection and economical power connection between church and the government. So when the exhibition was opened, a number of how can I properly call them, marauders, who were hired by a Russian Orthodox Church, Orthodox activists. So they got onto this exhibition. So they ruined some of the objects of this exhibition. So they used paint. They're trying to, write some signs on all these works. So, for example, on the left side, you see various in Cyrillics, various signs of this. For example, you hate Orthodox Church, you will be damned. You saying like it's blasphemy. So various types of like, it was like the exhibition was totally crashed. Because, well, the topic of Orthodox Church and the topic of the religion in Russia was still a huge, and even right now, so we haven't come any further with this, but it was a very discussable exhibition. Later on in 2007, it was an exhibition called Forbidden Art. So why it was called Forbidden Art? So it was held in 2007, and the relation towards forbidden art, it was like all sorts of artists and works that were forbidden for museums or galleries in 2006. So the exhibition was quite interestingly organized. So you can only see through a big hole, through only small hole to see a work that was forbidden in 2006. And all sorts of like religious, political religious images were presented in there. And this also was a type of the exhibition when all these activists from various nationalistic or Orthodox groups of people like invaded these exhibitions and trying to cancel it. And it was like a first signs of censorship in Russia back then, but nobody realized that the censorship machine will like develop in time. Because if we're talking about the legal actions during this exhibition, the people who were responsible for invading the exhibitions, for destroying some of the objects from these exhibitions, they were not fined, they weren't arrested. So they just like, basically, maybe they got some administrative measures, but nothing else. But the organizers of the exhibitions, through the like prism of Russian Orthodox Church and the government. So they were some kind of a guilty person in case of like, from the perspective of Russian government, not like all those marauders and people who just destroyed some of the objects from these exhibitions. But the situation with the exhibition started to develop in the late 2010. And there were many cases, and I'm just like showing only one of them. So it was an exhibition of an American photographer, Jock Sturgis. He's famous for taking pictures of children, like even naked children. That was like a very controversial topic, even in the 90s when he appeared in United States. So it was an exhibition in 2016 in Moscow at the Lumiere Gallery. So, and also some kind of activists from a movement called Serb, which is like basically a very pro-Putinist, pro-nationalist. So they invaded the exhibition and they were spilling the exhibition space with a stinky liquid. So they were using it to just like to spread all over the place. So the exhibition was closed because of these actions, and it was just like, it was a developing perspective of like actions that were considered as a signs of the censorship. So I guess there is always a problem between the representation of Russian art in the world. So even in Japan, there are a couple of names that, well, may be well known. It's like Ilya and Emilia Kabakov, that was like even presented at the first Echigo Tsumari Triennale, and Leonid Tishkov and some other names. But you see, the problem is Ilya and Emilia Kabakov, so they are, I guess right now they're about like 85, 87 years old. Leonid Tishkov is also like 70 years old. So just like basically saying this is a generation of post-Soviet art dinosaurs. So you don't know anything at all about Russian contemporary art if we are talking about like even middle-aged artists, not about the young one. So only, well, I know only about like a few names, but we have some small exhibitions in Tokyo in galleries, but not in the museums. And the same problem is considered with European countries, with America. So Russian art is not that visible on the world stage of art, although we got all this Venetian Biennale and all kind of other initiatives that are not working well, also because of the government involvement. So as you may know, like there was a type of radical performance in Russia, so which is like highly well known from Pussy Riot, through Peter, and you see, just like the radical performance is not only just like it's not like everything about the Russian art. There are many sides of Russian contemporary art, which is could be technological, which could be a very philosophical, dealing with very social, political aspects. But if we are talking about the image of Russian art world on stage, yeah, we will talk about some like radical performance, like art group Voina that appeared in 2007 and making various like very radical type of performances. So there are three images in here. The one is like how to name it properly in English. I will thinking. So this was a type of a radical performance when they drew a dick on the surface of a bridge in St. Petersburg. So then the bridge was rising, you can see like it was an erected penis. But the reason for this action was that this erected penis was dedicated to the police building that was like situated near this bridge. So they made various number of political performances. The second one was called like the policeman in the outfit of the Orthodox priest. And it was like a very funny performance because one of the member of Voina art group, so he went to a supermarket. So he had, well, like he stuffed various products into his bags, and he didn't pay anything for it because, well, he was like, because he had like two main images of Russian oppressive like forces, the police and the Orthodox priests. So nobody even asked for him to pay, and he just like strictly walked out of the supermarket without paying anything, or he just like gathered in there. So Voina art group was very popular during the period of late 2000, 2010, but they left Russia because of the oppression, because like since 2010, there were lots of oppression towards like political activities, towards various meetings, strikes, and even art. But from period from 2007 and until 2010, so they've been doing this radical type of actions. And the last one is called the Blue Basket, because there are many Russian parliament members and like many deputies, mayors. So when they are traveling through the Moscow, they're using like this blue bucket on their car, like because it's easier to move these through the traffics. And one of the member of Voina art group, so wear a blue bucket on his head and jumps on the car of some Russian parliament member. And it was just like, it was trying to show not only like to get hyped over the subject, but to show the current state of affairs due to political images, due to social problems that are existing in the society. So it's like really funny that, well, even in Eastern Europe, some type of a radical performance understand it better than any kind of intellectual art. So I'm not sure is there any connection towards this, but it's like a very interesting thought. So later on, some of the members of art group of Voina transformed into Pussy Riot, that is active right now, but well, mostly active as a punk rock group, not as an artist. So they held this some kind of a various actions, even in the Orthodox Church, that was like hugely discussed back in the early 2010. They also were prosecuted. They spent some time in prison, I guess maybe a year and a half or something. But it was just like showing that the contemporary art, even the radical forms of it, are not welcomed in the sphere of Russian contemporary art. And what I'm like really care in these situations, so there is some sort of, a very like bad attitude towards contemporary art. So this combination of words, because people are thinking of contemporary art like common people who are not involved into art, so they're living like everyday life. So they're thinking of contemporary art as something that is not understandable, something that is not art at all, something that is like very Western influenced. And there is like this type of a image of contemporary art is still existing in many minds of like Russian common people and Russian, well, people from the government. But even the ways for nationalist pro-Russian art, so they also try to call themselves contemporary artists, but there is something that is not working in the terms of conceptions in here. So even those artists who are like actively involved into like pro-Russian activities, so they are not sure how to call themselves, because well, contemporary art has this type of a like bad attitude, bad image for some of the people. So they're still trying to understand. I really hope that they won't understand it at some point. So, and later on, like we got, yes, Pyotr Pavlenko, who just had a number of performances in the middle of 2010, and at some point we can call him like the last like radical performance artist in the public sphere of Russian contemporary art. So this was like one of his most famous performances. It was the one that was held at the Red Square in 2013, where he nailed his post to the Red Square and stayed here for a couple of hours because he was trying to show how we are dependent on the political force and the state. And the other one that was held on the psychiatric hospital. So it was like a war where he cut a small piece of his ear, and it was like a huge controversial work about the current state of psychiatric therapy and how the patients in hospitals are being held in there. But I've also wanted like to talk about the side of art that is hugely connected to what we've been talking about today, about like life and death and how it is connected to the political aspect. So there was a work by Yuri Shabelnikov and Yuri Fesenko that was called Mausoleum, Ritual Model, or Lenin in You and Me. So it is like an answer to your questions, Kokos. So they ordered this type of cake that was like Lenin in a mausoleum. So he was like all these in flowers. And kids from the streets were asked to come to the gallery, and like hour by hour, the Lenin as a cake was eaten by those kids. Although kids didn't understand that it was Lenin and well, who is it and what they're doing, because they were interested, oh, sweets or cake. So they were interested in like small, like very astronomical point of view. But this was some kind of a ritual because people were eating an image of a politician, an image of a state, and they were trying to get rid of it. And it's like very, a connotation with that. If you're eating something that, well, it will eventually turn into shit. So they were trying to regain this whole process of like cannibalism, when you're eating someone and you're like rejecting its current nature, and you like overwalking in the image of a like governmental representative. It was like a really interesting work in the context of the late 90s, because it showed how people are trying to understand the Soviet past, and so how can we deal with the Soviet past. And the last one artist that I just like wanted to talk about, it's Vladislav Mamyshev Monroe. So he was one of the, well, for me, he's one of the most genuine artists in the context of Russian contemporary art. So he was kind of an imaginary artist who used cross-dressing techniques and image-facing techniques. So he is not something like similar to Morimura Yasumasa or Sawada Tomoko. Well, he's kind of a different artist because he worked with various techniques. So he's very well into covering into various famous people. He was into scratching a photograph. So he got a various number of techniques. And he was one of the visionary artists who worked with political subjects. Although he died on Bali in 2013, but well, his legacy and his creative force is unique towards Russian contemporary art context. And it's very interesting that right now his works, well, for me at least, I do think he had this very important political meaning, because he just like saw the current situation of political, oh, he was like a very funny character, but well, he became very actual at the moment. So his theory of images was based that he was like a something that was considered of the two images. So image of Marilyn Monroe, so he considered it as like the brightest side of life, like the law of energy, like the light side of life. And Adolf Hitler, who is considered as the like worst human of all, and like the negative images. So any other images are placed between Monroe and Adolf Hitler. So any other images that he did. So he did even in 1990s, he did this. So he used all these images of communist parties, the members of the communist parties, and he turned them into various stars. So for example, some of them were turned into Elizabeth Taylor or Gina Lollobrigida, into Sophie Loren. So he was trying to negotiate through the image, through the political image, and to deconstruct it. So the method of the deconstruction of the political image is very important, even in, well, in the current situation, because there are many artists who are trying to understand the Russian invasion through art. So they are trying to make some works about current situation. They are going through very, like, struggling with all these philosophers. So they are just trying to make some kind of a citation of their works and all that kind of stuff. But they are not working with the deconstructing of the political image. They are not working with the deconstruction of propaganda. And this is like the reason with this work that make it so valuable. So for people who are smart enough to understand that it's not like a caricature, but it's also like a deconstruction of the political image. So the people who are members of the Communist Party back then, so they had some force, they were representatives of the state, but they got deconstructed by turning them into like various famous cinema stars and all that stuff. But for common people, it's also like not only a caricature, but it's also like a funny way to understand, like, because well, all of us, even in our childhood, we like draw something on various photographs in magazines or in newspapers. It was some kind of a practice that were related to anyone during these times. But he was like very genuine in showing those type of aspects. He was trying to recreate the mythology and trying to show what is like scary enough about his characters, how he is dealing with them. So one of his projects was called Happy Lubov. It was connected with Lyubov Orlova, who was one of the most famous Soviet cinema stars, who was the most beloved actress of Joseph Stalin. So she had her career between 1920s to 1950s. So Mamyshev Monroe is trying to recreate her biography by researching her photographs. So he is trying to get into her character and he tries to tell her story by recreating all these types of like her biography. So, for example, the first one of the photographs on the left, there is a like description that Lyubov Orlova is receiving congratulations on her birthday from Joseph Stalin. So his is 1951. So he's trying to not only show the political context of it or historical, and he is like a very transformative person who is like, well, very talented in how to imitate his characters. And so he is showing her way through her early steps of the careers to her death. And I like really, this like reconstruction of her death photography, because it's like very hilarious, and I really like it. And for example, like another work that was made in 2001, it was called Cruel Romance. So he was dressed like, I forgot his name. So he was dressed as one of the leaders of Islamist revolution. And it was like very funny that in his in this type of imagery that he put on himself, he was walking around Moscow, and some of the people really thought that he was like a Muslim leader or something. And it was just like after the September 11, when the Twin Tower crashed into. So it was like very important to construct those sorts of images to have a political meaning and to have this connection with the context. And he also got this series that was very hugely popular in Europe and in Russia back then, in the middle of 2000, that was called Stars. So it's a number of photographs that was made like on the background of Kremlin and Red Square. So it was also like following the type of images of political figures, of religion figures that are well known. And by using it, he's not only deconstructing the political image of a type of person, how he's making them not only hilarious, but he's trying to live through the life of this character. So showing various aspects of them, although he's recreating those type of images through like, various type of materials that most of the artists, for example, Morimori Yasumasa is trying to create this accurate manipulations with the photography, with the painting. So he's always like well dressed up, or like Cindy Sherman. So she's also like very photogenic. So she's trying to give an accurate representation of a character. But Monroe is using every type of materials to construct those type of images, and it's like what is like really distinguishes him from other type of artists. And there's also like he had this ability to go back to the past. So it was called a work that was called Russia That We Lost. It was created around the historical myth that appeared in the early 2000 and in the middle 2000, that, for example, the life of the people in 1913 was much more better like than during this early Soviet period or during the Russian Empire. So this was kind of a national myth that was like stimulated by the Russian government at some point. So he is laughing about the myth. So he's trying to create all types of images of aristocracy that lived during the 1913. So he was like researching for various images. So he was like deconstructing the myth that was created by the public opinion or governmental opinion. So his way of deconstruction is not only visional, but very like there is some sort of a research that always lies behind all these type of works. And like one of the last works that he did in 2011, it was Remember the Gas. So he was recreating 3 images of Tymoshenko, the former Ukrainian Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin, who was a prime minister back then, and Dmitry Medvedev, who was a president of Russia back then. So it was a story about like all these, well, not conflicts, but all these contradictions between Russia and Ukraine about the gas that was traded back then. So he created those sort of material, just like creating some sort of a myth around this situation. So he is creating myth by destroying the myth that was happened before. So he is creating a story like Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev. So they're trying to free Timoshenko by sending her like a thing that will help her to cut the prison like window in bread. So he created those sorts of visionary stories, not only like love those people, but also to show the political context. And it was like, because he felt like now not so many artists had this feeling that something is changing in the political context of Russia in 2010. And I guess in April in the 2022, I was just like, well, sometimes I like reading and getting like retrospective of any artist and read some interview of him. So there was an interview that for me just like quite visionary. So the woman who was asking the question, she asked him how the mechanics of the transformation into a person works. So he said that my face fits the face of anyone in the range between Monroe and Hitler, and this is the maximum spread possible in the 20th century. If you make an accurate drawing, do not allow any deviations from the original, then at some point some strange chemistry occurs. It lasts just a few seconds, and only at this moment you need to take pictures, as someone else's soul is moving into you. For example, when I first dressed up as Putin, I had the feeling that I had become some kind of a colossal totem maggot that would now burst from eating shit. At the same time, I'm not a villain, but a forest cleaner, and I must devour our country as soon as possible. The dead, the great Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, so that a new life begins as soon as possible. And later on, this woman asked him, will like the Putin eat us? So do you think he will eat us? And he is answering, it was like, it was one of his last interviews. So he died about a few days after this interview. So he is answering, yes, and very soon. In Bali, where I lived for a very long time, there are a lot of different parasites, some wood bugs, termites, and now there is a luxurious stick cabinet in the style of Dutch masters in the house. Use it every day, you have clothes hanging in it, but at some point you touch it and it crumbled. It was just devoured, so it would be with our country. So what I'm trying to say by representing all these type of aspects of Russian creativity in the sphere of contemporary art, the institutional side of it. So the political side of it and the political image. So it can be constructed and could be a very strong image, like it was during the Soviet period, or it can be constructed and have no ideological platform, like what's happening with Russia now, because always tries to create some sort of an ideological image for Vladimir Putin, for contemporary Russia. It's not working correctly. And both sides of it, like Russian government, Russian people, know all that stuff. Because the motive for Russian people over time was like, oh, we won during the Second World War. But as you may see, like the Second World War was ended in 1945. Right now it's 2023. So the time distance is getting bigger and bigger, and there are not so many people who survived through like Second World War. So right now, maybe most people are 90 years old, 100 years old. So those type of generations, so they are disappearing. But the post-war generation that appeared in 50s and 60s, although all those type of subjects about those who experienced the war, they were not like discussed in families, because war memory is a sort of thing that you don't want to discuss after the war ended up. But there is a sense that something, when you like like eating a cake with a Lenin image, or like Monroe said, when you're transforming into a person who's just like devouring something. It's like a moment. It's like a moment of cleaning the country, and maybe, well, since I'm not like a type of a person who can give any sort of predictions and how the situation will turn out eventually, but there is some sort of sense that if if the point of events is coming to some sort of a radical offensive stage, but it could lead to a collapse of a state or repression machine, or whatever you may call it. So the story is like very hard to understand, even for me, although I live only like a small part of this context. But various aspects of art, of institutional life, as we see through all these slides. So we're showing some sort of contradictions between state and between art community. There were many good examples of how Russian community, what they did through all these years, what projects were presented in exhibitional spaces and institutional spaces. But, well, I've tried to concentrate it and to give you some sorts of types of narratives that are closely related to the politics, to life and death, because, well, even the regime, the state regime, is also a matter of life and death and how we survive through it. And the main material for all our conversation, and like even for Vladimir Putin, is always a time. So the time is a material that we are built on. So I've been like repeating it for many times with Vladimir Putin. At some point, he's like a thief of our time, of our lifetime. So what he's doing right now, he's stealing lives of Ukrainian people, of Russian people, and he's like stealing the life of the people who left Russia because, well, they got plans for building their future in Russia. Right now, they haven't got such an ability because they are moving to various countries, well, like I did. So he's stealing our time, and you got to think about it as a negative experience, but maybe it's like an ordeal that we have to come through to gain some sort of important life experience and to go back to Russia to build up a new country. So we can see it from this perspective. So there are many options that could be like, and many lessons that could be retrieved from this situation. But, well, you can see that the war, if you read the news and like following the situation, there are not so many signs that it's going to be over soon. So it's still continuing. People are still dying every day. Many people are losing their homes, losing their families, getting lost. And there are many situations in this case that have to be mentioned and talked about. But I do think, now if you're talking about the specific role of art, so art isn't like very fast or reacting on such things. So artists who are making some statements with their works about the current war, maybe they're not so effective because there are not so many time passed, and because, well, you can't afford right now, due to the political situation, you can't afford radical performances because, well, you just like the most obvious option and the conclusion of these events that you will go to the prison for your radical performances. Any other mention of war is also prohibited. So you got not so many options to express yourselves. But people are still trying to do it, even if they are not situated in Russia. But I do think at some point art is working great as art therapy. So like if people are involved in art and they're doing something, they are trying to keep up with their normal life, trying to stay culturally safe and to recreate those type of images of their former life. But on the other side, like many museums, as I said, and many art fairs, many artists in Russia. So they keep doing something that is not related not only to art therapy, not only like to support something. So they are just doing something for people, and from the perspective that there is no war. And that is totally incorrect, because if you are like making a view that war doesn't exist, but it's something that's going very, very far, that's a question how this art could survive. And yes, this is it about my presentation and all these slides. I hope you haven't got very tired hearing me for I don't know how many hours I have been talking to you. So it's time for questions.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow. Wow, you really said all that things. But I was a bit scared to ask all these things that you mentioned. That is it okay to ask you know,
Yes.
how they are right now in Russia, the artists, and yeah, and yeah, asking you that question was scary for me, actually. Like,
Well,
is that okay? I was
yes,
like,
it's okay.
can
It's okay. Yeah.
right.
So the problem is that if we're talking about artists and art researchers that are in Russia, or some of them left the Russia. The problem is, for example, if you are an artist or an art researcher, you have to work with the context. For example, most of the Russian artists are working with the Russian context, with social problematics, with political problematics, or even some historical events. So when you're leaving your country, you're losing your source of inspiration, you're losing your source of the material.
Yes.
On the other side, for art researchers, it's the same time. So if we're going to archives or to interview some persons, they can't do it if they're situated in Kazakhstan, in Armenia, or anywhere. The people who are staying in Russia, so their life, like their public life, is very limited right now. So, you know, as I said, the life in museums and galleries, all these openings with champagne are still going on. But if we're talking about decent artists who doesn't want any of these like type of events, and they're trying to gather themselves and trying to understand what they can do right now, because like institutions like state institutions are getting controlled by the government. Independent institutions, most of them frozen their activities. So people are losing their jobs, and like even before the war, so cultural workers, museum workers, art historians, artists.
Yes.
So we are those like a wealthy class of people in Russia. So it's like art workers and museum workers have like a small salaries, and we have like no like professional community, because as I said, we are very separated from each other. And well, even after the year have passed, I don't think that Russian artists have enough strength together with each other. So I guess the society of artists and art researchers are still very fragmented. But well, people when they live in the country, they are thinking about how to survive, where to go next, how to like put your life somewhere, well, in Georgia or in Armenia. So I don't think that, well, the professional community that is in Russia, I guess that is trying to survive. So it's trying to stay low, like really quiet, really shadowed, and doing something that is like at least possible to do, but very like on very low basis, because well, we can't afford doing like very, you know, something that is like politically or socially accelerated. But well, what can you do like when the war is happening? I guess all you can think and do about its political and social context, because well, I don't think you have to think about well ecology or technological art, about media art, when you have like a war and such a historical political context.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see that there's a, I don't know, gigantic museum in Moscow, and there's a art fair going on, and so that's very interesting. That's kind of, I didn't think that was like that. And I have two questions. Like one for, yeah, people who left Russia, but first of all, okay, if I were Putin,
I hope
and
not.
if I want to fill the art fair with, or museum which is open now and empty, and I want to fill it with the good art. And what is good art for, I don't know whether I can call him fascist or communist. I don't know what's the right term that he would like, but is there any possibility to see something interesting? Because I think okay, I'm used to the new Russians kind of political art, because that's very famous, right? And
Yeah.
then now the government is encouraging to make work which is pro-war, but you cannot mention war. And this work, if I understood it correct, the kind of war art that I saw were military people with flowers, and
Yeah.
it was it's slightly interesting because it's done in high art. Oil, looks like oil. That was
Yeah, it's
slightly interesting, but others looked like game, like gaming art.
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
the works that you see in NTF.
Yeah.
So, but in a way, it's like maybe it's being very open to common people. You use a term that
Yeah.
was interesting, and maybe it's maybe they're trying to be accessible to everybody in a way, because in the high art must be like a bad thing in
Yeah.
the context at the moment. So but it just looks like things that I've seen before without any context.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you
Understood
think
your
there's
questions.
yeah, I mean, I'm not happy. I mean, I don't like anybody getting killed, and I'm against any kind of violence, but I wonder if this situation goes on. I mean, I'm curious if there's any interesting art comes out of it, but what
Yeah.
can you make, like
Mm.
a painting of a mountain, or I don't know, painting of rabbit, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm
So
curious if there's anything interesting comes out. And that's
yeah.
first question. The second question is, yeah, like not only Russians, but also like people from Hong Kong, or people from Myanmar are also the people who can leave the country, leave the country, because it's easier nowadays than, let's say, like 50 years ago. And
Yeah.
that do you think that can affect our future in some ways? I don't know. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the
So yeah.
two questions. Yeah.
So the first question, let's start with it. So Vladimir Putin has never showed his interest in art at all. So during whole his period of reign, so we haven't seen any his like interest that he was been like telling about his interest in even in painting or something like this. So he
I
was
saw
completely-
his calendar at the airport. It looked like a kitsch, gay kitsch posters that you see in I don't know, in the Europe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, the only thing that I like remember from my experience that he was opening the exhibition in Guggenheim Museum. It was like maybe 2000 or 2001. So he was opening the exhibition in Guggenheim Museum that was called Russia, so the history of Russia or something like this. So he's basically, maybe he's interested in the construction of history or ideological images. But if we're talking about art, so he's not interested at all. So even when he was invited to guest number 2 in Moscow, he didn't show any interest to the contemporary art. So he haven't even like talk about contemporary art artists or even some classical art. So I guess he doesn't give a shit about art at all. So, but if we're talking about the like what museums are trying to show, you see, the problem that is luckily happening to propaganda artists, there are not so many like famous artists, Russian artists from the like contemporary sphere of art who supported the war. So basically, all these propaganda, pro-Russian, pro-Putin, whatever you call them, artists, so they are not well known. Basically, they are nobody. So those people, and I'm not really sure that they are like all these enthusiastic about the war. So I think that basically what they are enthusiastic about is money. So basically it's like a commercial system because, well, you receive a grant from Russian government to pay in some soldiers that they're like fighting. And so you're receiving like a huge amount of money. So you drew some like shitty painting with an oil, with the cheapest oil. And like you having these exhibitions when you like presenting it saying, oh, I've drawn a number of Russian soldiers. So that's the conception. And later on, they are living with a bunch of money. And so they are out of the context. Well, except like some like ideological artists, like, as I said, is, for example, Alexei Beляев-Gintov. But I guess even for him, he is also like trying to make up his salary. And well, whenever the wind flies, so he will go there and try to make anything else. So ideology, as I said, through the years, they were trying to build up an ideology based on religion. It didn't work out because, well, Russia is consisted of many people who can be Orthodox Church, Catholic Church, or Muslim. So there are many types of religions in Russia. So building the identity on the religion doesn't work. Building the idea about like strong Russia and that kind of stuff, it also didn't work out well because like the people are still living, if we're not talking about big cities and if we're talking about small cities, towns, villages, they're living a very poor life, so they're trying to survive. So it didn't work out as well. So the only ideological image for them that they are trying to create is like a collage of past, the collage of history. So they are trying to assemble it in a way that is suitable for the government. And that is why the art is also losing some sort of like propaganda moods. Yes, they're using like clear images like soldier. All right, like, I don't know, any propaganda images of kids, of women, and it's basically, and that is like also really like interesting. And most of the propaganda artists are men. Women are not so like connected with all this propaganda stuff, but also mostly are the men artists who are like earning political points, earning monies by trying to create these paintings. And as you can see, the only thing that they're trying to create is maybe photography and painting. So they are not that talented to create a video work, or they are not that talented to create some, like, I don't know, media or VR projects or something like this. So they're using the most primitive, the most simple way to create, and the most cheapest way to create art. So they are not going anywhere with this concept. I guess, well, you can use whatever you want. You can use drawing, the painting, but well, you can see the quality of it. And the quality of this propaganda art is very low. And I don't think that many people are visiting those type of exhibitions, because the people are tired of war, even in Russia, even the people who are not like fighting, people who are living in cities, who are suffering from sanctions, from the raising prices. So they are tired of war, but they are scared at the same time. They are tired because, well, they've been tired for 30 years after post-Soviet, because like they were trying to find a new future for themselves. They got robbed again, and they are like tired of getting robbed again once and once again. But I think that we can see, I guess, it depends on how the censorship machine will work out in future. I guess it will also lead to some, underground art once again, or maybe to some flat exhibitions, to online exhibitions, well, whatever there are many options right now to make it. So, but museums, what they are now are trying to do, so they just like using their collections. So it's just basically some retrospectives, some like, oh, you see, we've got this one object in our collection, that one. So they got a collection to work with. Because, well, any new contemporary art, well, you can be like, they're afraid to present contemporary artists because they do not know, maybe some people from Russian government or police will came to the exhibition and they will see something in the work that is, although could be not political. So I do think that all the exhibitions that will be held right now will be very, well, totally neutral, totally without historical, political, well, historical context could be, but only in a positive way for Russia. You see, so I don't think that will be like any signs for good art if we are talking about even good propaganda art. So there will be no good propaganda art. So propaganda will always be very bad, very low quality, and very extensively dependent on money and grants from Russian government. But independent art, underground art, whatever you call it. So I guess maybe there will be some signs of life. But you see, for me, it's like a very funny way to understand that some of the propaganda artists seen in like common artists like that have been in the sphere of contemporary art. So they are pro-Western art, so they're copying from West and that kind of stuff. So I just got really tired of all these contexts. Yeah, there are many artists, contemporary Russian artists, who are copying European, American, artists because, they're doing what is popular, that is commercially actual for them. Why not? Well, it's their choice. Well, there are many artists who choose other paths. And well, there are some art initiatives in Russian communities abroad, but I don't think, this type of art works. Because, when you're losing the ground for your context, when you're moving to another country, you're losing the tie between context and the image. So I guess it won't work well. So the second question is, I
leaving
forgot
the
it.
country. Yeah, leaving the country. There's more people who can do that.
Yeah, I remember it. You see, I do think that the difference is, for example, the people who are living in Hong Kong or Myanmar, they, for example, the people who are living in Hong Kong, they're afraid because China will invade Hong Kong. And they are free to go, they can be financially strict, but they can choose where they can go, and they have got abilities to do this. The people who are fleeing from Myanmar, like a very poor state. Like, I guess there are some refugee programs or something like this, but like those are independent individuals that are suffering from Myanmar oppressive state. The people who are living in Russia right now, so they are living from the country that is invading Ukraine. So they are living like from the aggressive side. And through the latest months, as I can see, there are not so many options for Russian people to go anywhere. Because, well, even in Kazakhstan right now, so they are making new laws that are like very like strict on border regimes, on migration policy, on the number of days that you can stay in Kazakhstan. The same thing is discussed in Georgia, in Armenia, like the neighboring countries around Russia. So Russian people are like, it's really hard to get a Schengen visa to go to Europe. So I guess it's mostly possible to get a green card to go to United States. So I do think that there are not so many options for Russian people to go, and these options are very limited. And as is like my own experience, the thing is like, it's hugely terrible. It's like a financial system, since like all Visa, MasterCards, so they were turned off from Russia. So they are not working anywhere in the world. So we are just like losing money because of the conversion that we have deal. So we will try, well, in Kazakhstan, we had a Kazakhstan bank cards. And so financial question and issues because of various sanctions is also like putting a big pressure on Russian people who are fleeing from the war. I guess it was like spring 2022 when German government had some discussions about giving a refugee to Russian people who are fleeing from the war. But, well, we haven't got any result of this conversation. It was like just like a conversation to talk about, but no real results have been like given. And I do understand that Europe is like, is overflowing with Ukrainian refugees who are millions of people. And especially like before there were Belarusian refugees who like run away from Lukashenko and his policy in Belarus. So Europe is overflooded with refugees. But, well, I guess there should be options, but I'm not sure that any of the government is interested in receiving Russian refugees or simply just like Russian temporary visitors. So it only works for people who had enough money, who had maybe some connections, like maybe they have some relatives in these countries. Yes, well, it works for them. But for Russian refugees, I guess it's really hard to find themselves a place if they are not like, if they're an independent person, so they are living on their own.
Wow. So, can I ask? There's some audience here. Can I?
Yes,
them
I
if
would
they
like.
have
Yes,
something?
maybe I will first answer the questions that were given by Makoi.
There's something.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, like
Right.
I've got 3 questions, so I can like. One of them I've already answered because I was talking about GenDAI and yes. So what was my motivation for starting GenDAI project? So you see, I was like really interested in Japanese Gendai art, and there was nothing to read about Japanese contemporary art in Russia. There were some few reviews on the exhibitions. There were some like few primitive articles about Japanese art, but I was like really eager to know something about it. That's why like this project appeared, because well, at first it was like my educational process, and later on I just like got really interested and well got really tied to this topic, and I decided like if no one is addressing to this topic, so I should be addressing to this. And yes, I do think it's about like it's an intermediate agent between like Russian, Japanese, like contemporary artists, because well, there are no actual ties between them. So I know only one Japanese art historian. She's a woman. Her name is Akana Kano. So she's like really interested. But well, she's interested in all those like great granddads of Russian contemporary art, like Ilya Kabakov and all that kind of stuff, not on the contemporary history. Yeah, so I'm doing with the project, yes, I'm just like, I'm coming through like a moral dilemmas that while continuing this project, because, well, how can I talk about like art when people are dying? But through the months, almost a year has passed, I just had a brilliant thought, I guess, for me that, well, all these events, they shouldn't prevent me for doing my duty, for doing my work. And I do think that I've got some plans to continue my work. So at first I was like really hesitating, how can I like talk about art in these circumstances? But right now I think that even if there is a war, but well, Vladimir Putin don't want to like get the eye to be stopped, so I shall continue it. So it's not his decision, it's mine to continue my work. So there was also a question, are there any platforms around you that connect individuals with, for example, government or society? So government, well, for example, there are many platforms, community platforms, community governmental, half governmental platforms that are suited for these purposes. For example, well, you're living in your house and there is like something is broken. So you are leaving a message to this like website that something is broken in your house or something isn't working in your neighboring area. So yeah, it will be fixed. Well, you just send in a photo that something is not working, something is not correct, something maybe there is dirt or garbage around, so they will be cleaned. So there are many like state platforms that can that allow you to just like to resolve some everyday stuff. You can also like write a letter to your deputy, to your mayor. Well, you can even write a letter to president, but well, as you may understand it, well, it's not working and nobody like cares about your letter to Vladimir Putin or something. Yeah, there are some platforms, and between like society, yes, there are platforms. But as you see, as you may see, since the war breakout, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, so they were blocked in Russia. So you can only access them through VPN. YouTube isn't blocked. They also got a social network called VK. So it's like an analog of Facebook or WeChat, Chinese WeChat. So it's working, but it's like almost a governmental right now. So people who are in Russian social networks are very careful about what they posting, about what they writing to each other. Not that it just like be not like police is like trying to read your messages, but for example, if you got caught by the police in some case, so they would search through your social network because they can make a requirement for this. So this is about social networking. And yeah, and the question was the last question was connected to trauma zone. So about my own memories and experience of growing up in that history and how you felt it gave you the strength to live, which you feel connected to your activities. You see, it's just like really funny to understand how your life work in this way. So I was born in 1996. So it was during the President Yeltsin rule. I was 3 years old when Vladimir Putin came. So I wasn't like that strictly connected to the politics of Russia when I was 3 years old. Although I do remember like when the President Yeltsin resigned and Vladimir Putin came. So, but since I was a kid, I wasn't like that really interested in politics until I guess I was 16 or 17, because it was like early 2010. It was like Alexei Navalny, all these strikes on the streets of Moscow, all this like election when Vladimir Putin got elected again, once again on his third term. So that was interesting for me because like it was kind of a rebellious age for me, and I was just like really interested in all that stuff. But I can't compare my childhood to any other because, well, as a child, you just like, you don't choose where to be grown up, well, where to live. Well, you just appreciate the reality around you as it is. So I can say that I like, until my parents got, well, their marriage got broken up. So they got divorced. Well, we lived like in a very like middle-class family. So during my childhood, teenage years, I traveled abroad, well, to many countries, to France, Spain, Great Britain, well, any other country. So even after I turned 18 years old and I was able to like to travel alone, I traveled to lots of countries and all was good, like except the COVID like situation that happened in 2019. So I had a full life full of cultural activities, and I was like really into all these museum galleries lives in 2011, 2012. So yeah, there is, well, you can deal with various stuff from corruption, from like bureaucracy, but and there's also like a strict line between, well, my life, I was born in Moscow, so I could do nothing about it, but my life was in Moscow. So Moscow is a very like contemporary city that is quite comfortable, where you get a beautiful like a city that is very comfortable with transport system. It's amazing, really. You could go anywhere you want. There is a financial system that is working well. So I just like can pay anything with my telephone, smartphone, because, well, it's, well, really great. And there are many cafes, restaurants, museum, galleries, cinemas, whatever you want. But I guess the situation in smaller cities, towns, villages, it's different. It's like the reason why we see the tendency that most people are leaving all these small cities, small towns, and they are moving to Moscow or St. Petersburg or to Vladivostok because they want to live like in contemporary cities, not in the dying cities that are somewhere living in late 90s or early 2000s. There is like difference between our realities of people who live in Moscow and the reality of people who live in small towns. It's like, it's a drastically, totally different situations for us. And this is a reason why most of the people living in small cities, small towns, they got not so many cultural activities. So this is why they watch television. This is why propaganda works so well on them, because like they have nothing to do. They only got credits. They only got like 2 works to work with. So they got a full life of hardship, working, and like alcohol or something like this. So I guess it's different for them to understand their like growing up experience. But you see, I clearly remember when it was 2008 and there was like a short period of time when Russia invaded Georgia during the Olympics that was held in Beijing. So I clearly remember all of those things. I clearly remember when in 2004, the submarine called Kursk got drowned. And it was like no reaction from Vladimir Putin for a couple of days, and people died in this submarine that drowned into the sea. So we just like, I remember all the terrorists that occurred in Russian subway, or Nordost, a terror that appeared in Russian theater, was a terrible one. For 3 days, people being held as a captives in there, and many died. So I do remember all of this, and I do remember how Vladimir Putin was elected, re-elected, re-elected, re-elected. So Vladimir Putin is like, he's going for 23 years of rule. So it's just like he's been like a king at some point. And some people like really accepting him as a king because, well, who could be another president if not Vladimir Putin? So people are just like so scared of their reality that they are thinking that there is no future without Vladimir Putin. So they are so like hypnotized. But well, I'm not sure by what aspects of his character they are hypnotized, because well, for me he's like a really like a dwarf man who just like giving a bad jokes, who is like very unattractive, and especially since he is getting more older and older, he just like get this like silicone slump. So I don't know, maybe he has gone through some surgery.
The only thing my mother noticed. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So I've witnessed it all, and you see, just like for me, I was always like kind of a like liberal guy. So since well, I really value my independence. I really value the expression of freedom, of creativity. So I've never been like I've never changed myself to any of the governmental bullshit or propaganda. But well, there are people who just like, yes, they turned upside down. So there were people who were like over bright, over creative, but when the war started, they started to support it. So these things also happening. But the problem is that, for example, if we're talking about like this Soviet collapse and how, because, well, I do not have any regrets about the collapse of Soviet Union because I never lived in it. I never wanted to live in it. Well, I do understand that, for example, my parents or my grandparents, so they lived through it. So I appreciate their life experience, but not their Soviet experience. And I have got no affection towards the Soviet culture because it was like very strict, very censorship. Well, you can't go anywhere because of the Iron Curtain and all that stuff. But for my parents, as I well mentioned in my email, so for them, it's not also a tragedy. I mean, for my father, he has always been a very pro-Western guy. So he just like, when the Iron Curtain fell, he started to travel a lot. You know, he started to earn money. So, well, he'd been well, around the world a lot. For my mother, maybe, well, it's not a tragedy, but well, he's just like maybe more neutral about it. For my grandfathers, yes, because they lived like my grandfather was born in 1939 and he's still alive. And my grandmother was born in 1942. So they lived the most part of their life during the Soviet Union. So while I was talking to them about what do they feel about the collapse of Soviet system, so they were not so like, you know, regretting about this like Soviet communism ideology or something. They, at some point, and it's maybe understandable for them, they were regretting that they are losing the order in the country because they are thinking that there was an order in Soviet Union, there is no order in contemporary Russia. They are hating the idea of democracy because they feeling that in the 90s, when all this competition between Soviet ruble and ruble, and it collapsed, when economical crisis, so they lost all their money that they just like had through the Soviet period. They all lost their pensions. So they were just like had a feeling that they're being robbed by the government, by the new government. And that's why they have some, you know, objections towards the democracy. They have got no like strict affection to Vladimir Putin because, for example, my grandfather always speaks of himself that Vladimir Putin is always telling something but not doing it. So he's like a lecturer, but well, not doing his prophecies. But they are like, you know, I won't call them like the generation of my grandfather and grandmother. I wouldn't call them like a pro-Russian, but yeah, they are more like state-oriented people. Well, because they watch television, although yes, they can use their tablets or smartphones, but they are mostly into television and all these propaganda shows. Like it's, well, I can't watch it at all. So only like about a couple of minutes, and later on, I'm just like, I need to lay down for a couple of weeks because it's really devastating. There are people that are trying to alienate another people to each other. It's like terrible. So I do feel that it's kind of an image that is happening right now. But for them, you know, just like when the war started out, there is a sense at first that they were trying to put a distance, like, wow, the war is happening, there is a reason for it. So that's how they thought. Because, well, they are not trying to get into the matter of things. They're thinking, oh, if the Russian government and Vladimir Putin decided that the war should be held, well, there is a reason for it. So this is how they just like trying to describe these whole processes from themselves. But I don't think that there should be any reason for holding a war. That's a difference.
Yes. It's really, yeah, complicated. I'm going to attach the link to the BBC program that you
Yeah.
yes, wow. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm always
спасибо.
eager to talk. はい、ありがとうございました。
Yeah, yeah. I wonder what we can do, but yeah, just
See, I don't think that's, well, it's a thing that should be done by the government somehow to ease like the burden of this migration policy of issuing visas for Russian people. You see, but just like the problem is that European governments are afraid that Russian people who are even like pro-war people will go to Europe. It's like, it's a very like, you know, misconnected logic for people, because there are lots of people in Russia who are pro-war, but they are like missing their European traveling. And there are many Russian people who are living in Germany, in United States, who could be pro-war, but they still don't want to go back to Russia because, well, the living in Germany or in United States is much more better than living in Russia. So it's like some sort of contradiction.
yes.
But you can't be just explain. And all these talks like, well, I've never tried to, you know, just like, it's barely impossible to talk to those people who support the war. So you can show them like the photographs, the videos from like that the houses are destroyed, that people are dying. No, they will be saying that it's all fake, we don't believe in it. So they were trying to resist the information as much as possible.
Wow. Well, I made one Russian friend. That's good. I think. And yeah, let's keep talking and be safe.
Well,
yeah,
thankfully,
thank you.
through this process of getting visa to Japan, yes, well, it just like it was a terrible adventure, but well, we finally managed to obtain visa for 90 days. So I'm coming.
Oh, excellent! Congratulations, great. Yeah, he's coming to Japan for 19 days. Let's go and see him and go for drink. Yeah, that's good thing, right? Okay.
But it was just like, you know, it's like really hard to get visa for a foreigner in Kazakhstan, because if you got, yes, the Russian Japanese embassy is requiring that if you're Russian, you shall get a Japanese visa only in Russia. So it was like really hard for us to get a Japanese visa in Kazakhstan. So if not the help from Koizumi Meiro, so we wouldn't make it at all. So he just been like talking to the council, calling him, writing him emails. So we had such a huge package of documents to prove that we can go to Japan. So it was just like really hard and like really humiliating at some point, because they were thinking of us of some like, you know, like we criminals. So like, do you know that you can stay over like 90 days or you be like, there will be consequences for you or Meira. So like, you know, just like really terrible.
Oh. Yeah. Right. Okay. Gosh. Yeah, you're brave. And we look forward to seeing you. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, wow. Yeah, we are kind of stuck in a very small room with what is it? This kind of heating system. We can kill ourselves in this small room. We need some oxygen. We could really commit suicide in here. But yeah, it was fantastic and great presentation. And yeah, you're so brave. I learned so much from you. And yeah, cool.
Oh, you see,
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
皆さん、こんにちは。
So I catch you up later again. Yeah, and have a nice day. Yeah.
Yes, have a nice flight, I guess, very soon.
Oh yeah, you're coming
Yeah.
very soon. Yeah, do your
Yeah.
packing on this stuff. Yeah. Okay. All right. See you soon then. Yeah.
はい。
Bye.
はい。
and YouTube live.
Yes,
Okay.
I stopped.
Wow. Great. So yeah, I should let people. Yeah, I think they're a bit dying.
Well,